All right, welcome back. We're in the Jeremiah series. We do have a title for today, and it's like one of those shows where they have like the name of the movie in the movie randomly. So when we get to that part, it'll make sense. But the beginning of where we're going today in Jeremiah is a little preliminary. So most of you all who are here watched this live on Patreon. So you guys knew that I had traveled to Israel. So I've been back a week, I think. Just sad. That week went by really fast. I was like, oh, it's been so long already. So I got back last Friday back to the United States and then back home that following Sunday. And it was a very, very interesting trip. If I had to give a title for my trip, this trip would have been definitely like my Jeremiah trip, because of course I'm in Jeremiah. So I'm trying to find all things Jeremiah. And it was interesting because I had this list that I made before I went. I was like, oh, I want to see this and I want to go here. And I haven't seen this yet. And I haven't seen this yet. And I'll tell you this. I don't even think I checked my list again once I got there, and everything that was supposed to happen happened. And I feel like if everything was supposed to happen had a poster child, I'm that girl. So got there, and the first thing I realized, and this background information is important to where we're going with the lesson. The first thing I realized, and we'll talk a lot more about this in conversations and as the information settles into my mind, everything I wanted to see was in the West Bank. Go figure. And so yeah, I had to do a thing, which was either agree that I'm supposed to do everything I'm supposed to do and do it, or let my fear keep me in the safe parameters of the places that are recommended. Well, you all know me well enough to know that I went with the more riskier one. So one of the places that we ended off at in Jeremiah 13, Jeremiah goes down to Paratz, and we went through that whole thing about the word, and it wasn't necessarily Euphrates, but it was in Parat, and it's actually a valley outside of Anathoth. So where do you think your girl went? To Parat, which is in the West Bank. It's within Palestinian territory. That's where I went. It's a national park. It doesn't mean you can't go there. It's just, it was me and my aunt, who is over 30 years, probably 20 years, 30 years older than me. So it was just two of us. That was it. It wasn't a field trip. I wasn't with a group. I wasn't on a tour. And we were in the world's smallest rental car. Talk about that later too. Anywho, so went there, and that began the journey. And the journey ended, I told you it'd be a fat story slim once I got into it. The journey ended on my last day at Megiddo. And interestingly enough, where we left off and where we're going today were those two places. So that's how Yah does a thing. So we ended off with Jeremiah going to Parat. Now going to Megiddo is not necessarily the very next place Jeremiah went, but the struggle today, and I can take this screen share down, the struggle today for me personally was that Jeremiah is not chronological. I don't know if anybody who's read it, who's been studying, who's gone through Jeremiah before, it doesn't necessarily happen like, and then chapter 13 was the very next thing that happened. And then, now there are some points in it where it does follow a natural progression, and we'll see that. But after chapter 20, I think the very next thing that happens chronologically, like historically, is in chapter 49. So as I was reading today, I was like, okay, so I can't just take you all through Jeremiah like I was planning and then just throw in these pieces. So we're going to have to go a little sad, because I have to tell you that Josiah dies. And if you've read Chronicles and Kings, then you know he's dead. And if you haven't, it was thousands of years ago. So of course, but I don't know, for me, when those things happen, and especially when I'm reading or I'm really invested, I get sad all over again, like it just happened like yesterday. So I felt the need to give background information. The fact that I ended my trip in Megiddo is very important because Josiah dies in Megiddo. So that's super, 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 super important. And I want to give you, and it'll be kind of like I don't even want to call it like a ghetto history lesson, but it's just not going to be the most extensive history lesson because I don't want to keep you on here for 20 hours. So I'm going to give you the abridged version in my own words. I'm going to give you Bible verses so you guys can go back and read it, but I want to let you know what happened essentially even between Ain Parat and what we're going to look at next, which is all these proclamations against Jerusalem, because moreover, he's like, moreover, and then Yah said, time happens in between these things. Things are developing. All of Jeremiah, early Jeremiah, is not just prophecy. So I got to bring you guys up to speed because we can't just age Jeremiah, because right now, where we're going to pretty much pick up, Jehoiakim and Jehoiakim are going to be king. Those are Josiah's sons. So that's going to bring Jeremiah up to about 39 to 40 years old. This pretty much throughout this period, we've been looking at Jeremiah in his 20s. Time passes, but we don't really get the passage of time because it's not a narrative. So I have to like bring you up to historical speed. So then as we begin progressing and he starts talking about the rule of this king and this king, we don't feel like it just happened overnight, because that's just not how Yah does things. They had time. There was space between the preaching. There was space in there. And so I want to make sure that we give some due respect to Josiah's life, but we also have to look at what happened with Josiah, and then we're going to move forward. So I'll tell you what arrested me. I've been listening to Jeremiah 13, reading Jeremiah 13. I've probably read Jeremiah 13 at least 50 times. Minimum. I'm talking about minimum of 50 times since the last time we got with each other. And last night when I was reading in chapter 13, I got past where we won't get this far today. I got to a part and it said, tell the king, and it says in the queen in English, but in Hebrew it says the queen mother, to humble themselves. And I was like, oh, something changed. Who's the queen mother? Where'd she come from? That was the signal. So we've talked about this before. When we're studying, we're looking for things that are said, that are happening, that arrest us and make us go, where are we? Where are we? What are we talking about? Who is it talking about? So in 2 Kings and Chronicles, the queen mother is mentioned as Jehoiakim and Jehoiakim's mother. Jehoiakim's mother. And so that phrase is used for her. And we'll get into that later, but that's what stopped me. I was like, something shifted. Jeremiah is not just talking to just in general. Now he's pointing out specific people and specific things have happened. Okay. So that's what arrested me. All right. So we're going to, and I'm going to take you on a bit of a journey, because I need you guys to know some of these people, some of these names. So the first part I told you is just like a bunch of historical information, all because this is real. Sometimes when we read it, sometimes when we listen to it, even when we hear historical things that we know are true, they seem so far away. And what makes things more real, especially for those of us who live, like say in a city where you probably lived there your whole life. So my aunt lived here, my cousin lived here. And even if they move, you know where those houses are and you know where those streets are and you're familiar with the territory. So it keeps the reality of those people and those places, even though they've passed on, ever present. So people ask me, why do you still visit Israel if X, Y, and Z, and if da, da, da? Because it's real. And because the mountains are still the same, and the streets are still the same, and the oceans are still the same, and the ruins are still in certain places, no matter how many people have passed through that land since the sack of Jerusalem in 70 AD, the reality that the place exists, that the artifacts exist, that the people were there is a constant reminder, not only of the realness of the people, but of the realness of the God attached to the people, because it's evidence of everything that he said would happen. So while I take you on this little historical journey, it's because if we don't leave today with anything else, Yah is real, period. Period. Literally us living and breathing and studying and conversing is evidence of it. But added to that, he leaves a book with people, places, times that you and I just did it, can literally get on a plane. And while here we don't talk about it with such passion, there are people, whether European, whether scholars, whether universities, who spend millions of dollars to excavate and find things that prove the validity of something that was stripped away from us through the diaspora and through our own disobedience. So go on this little journey. So it's a bit of a nerd run, but we're going to start with, of course, Josiah. So I don't know if I mentioned this when we were looking at, and I'm going to go back over here. When we started Jeremiah, and I was telling you about the age of Jeremiah and Josiah and how Josiah becomes king. I don't know if you guys knew this, but Josiah by name was prophesied years before he was born to be the king of Judah, over Judah, who was going to, and we'll read it, he was prophesied to be what the text says as the prophet and priest killer. It's in the text. So we're going to go to 1 Kings chapter 13, because I told you we have to give Josiah his due diligence before we move on. And we're going to go to 1 Kings 13 and check this out. And behold, there came a man of Elohim out of Judah by the word of Yah unto Bethel. By the way, Bethel is in the West Bank. It's in the place where you're not supposed to visit without people. Very interesting. Came unto Bethel, and Jeroboam stood by the altar to burn incense. Now, you know, Jeroboam, he was on that stuff. And he cried against the altar in the word of Yah and said, O altar, thus saith Yah, behold, a child shall be born unto the house of David, Josiah by name, and upon thee shall he offer the priests of high places that burn incense upon thee, and men's bones shall be burnt upon thee. And he gave a sign that same day, saying, this is a sign which Yah has spoken. Behold, the altar shall be rent, and the ashes that are upon it shall be poured out. And it came to pass, when King Jeroboam heard the saying of the man of Elohim, which had cried against the altar in Bethel, that he put forth his hand from the altar, saying, lay hold on him. And his hand which he put forth against him dried up, so that he could not pull it again unto him. The altar also was rent, and the ashes poured out from the altar, according to the sign which the man of Elohim given by the word of Yah. And the king answered and said unto the man of Elohim, entreat now the face of Yah, and pray for me, that my hand be restored again. That boy by name is Josiah. So I don't think I did. And I think that is very significant as we take this little historical journey, because in about 639 BC, so years later, this is like during when the kingdom was still divided, but they were worshiping, and Jeroboam built the golden calves. It was that whole period. Years later, you get an 8-year-old kid who is the grandson of one of the worst kings that Israel has known, Manasseh. And he is the king that is known as the prophet and priest slayer. We read through that already. Josiah was like, kill everybody, sacrificing to false gods, tear down all the altars, tear down all the high places. He was a king after Yah's own heart. As that king is being raised up, you don't just have just him, but then 10 or 20 years after you get Jeremiah, you get Daniel born. Daniel's born, and then they're carried off to captivity, and he goes into Babylon. And then not too far after that, you get Ezekiel. We talked about already the contemporaries of Jeremiah, which was Zephaniah. If you want to hear somebody echo what's happening, go read Zephaniah. You want to hear somebody echo what was happening, read the prophecy of Huldah. So you get a functioning picture of the prophetic world during that time, but a lot of people forget that the world at large was still happening. So this is happening within Israel, within what they call the Levant, right? That Canaan. And so constantly there was interactions between Egypt, there's Babylon, Assyria. A lot of people forget that until there was a switch into the influx of Japhetic peoples into the land, a lot of this fighting was amongst Hamitic and Shemitic people. Ashur was Shemitic, right? So we say the Assyria later becomes Japhetic, it becomes a mix, but Ashur was a son of Shem. We're going to talk about Pharaoh Necho. Pharaoh Necho comes from Egypt. I think you guys know this, but I'll reiterate it. One of the biggest things that happened during the Exodus was not just that the Hebrews, the Israelites, got out of Egypt, but that war, if you will, with the plagues and all the stuff that happened, was a sign of defeat of the Egyptians. Canaan and several other places were under, for lack of better terms, Egyptian occupation. They already whooped these places. So the fall of Egypt signified that Israel, who technically through their God had defeated Egypt, meant that they had already won all the territories that belonged to Egypt. That's kind of how it went. So when you move forward during Jeremiah's time, one of the biggest issues was that Israel, the northern tribes, had already gotten their butt sorely taxed and whooped by Assyria. Assyria was vicious. So we're going to look at, let me just switch my screen back, and I'm just going to give you some Googleable information. So we're going to just stay right on Safari. I even have the things pull down. So you have Ashurbanipal. He was the last ruler over Assyria. That's who came in. He whooped Nineveh. He whooped the Elamites. So these are all names, the Elamites, all these people that you read about in the scripture. He's whooped them. The reason why I put up actual pictures, this is from the British Museum, is because the one thing I want you to get in your mind is this is real. It wasn't something that was just documented in the Bible and nowhere else. There was conquest happening. And so as we're reading through Jeremiah, and he's like, hey, this people is coming down from the north. There's two wonderful things happening. One, Yah is giving him insight to things happening outside of Israel. They don't have the news. I mean, there's word of mouth, of course, but they don't have like, oh, pull up the channel and let's go watch what's happening in Ukraine and Russia. No. So Yah is giving him insight to literally the military movement of these nations. And he's like, this nation is going to swallow up this nation. And this nation is coming here. So when Jeremiah first begins prophesying, Assyria is still strong. And Assyria's greatest ally is Egypt. Egypt, the Egyptian nation, is Assyria's greatest ally. They fight together. So you have Babylon rising up. You have Nabopolassar, and then you have Nebuchadnezzar, who is also Nebuchadnezzar, right? And you have them also having their conquest. And so the weakening of Assyria is very, very sensitive to the Egyptians, because if Assyria is weakened, who is their greatest ally, who had, and if you look up Ashurbanipal and look at his conquest, he was the meanest guy ever. In this particular relief, he actually, I don't know if I can zoom in on it. See this right here? This is the Elamite king. He has a ring. Oh, you can't see it. Okay. Let me see if I can stop and then share. Okay. How about now? Okay. So this is the Elamite king. He took his head, put a hook through it, and he has his head hanging off a tree. That's how he got down. And he's just sitting here, look, and everybody's serving him, and he's sipping, drinking wine, living his best life. That was the kind of fierce man he was. He was also known as the lion hunter. So you'll see like reliefs of him on conquest, just hunting lions. Like he was something else. He was something else. Okay. So that just gives you an idea. This guy really exists, leading the Assyrians. Okay. Then you have, go here, I'm going to stop the share and then share it again, just so we know it works. All right. Here you have a terracotta cylinder, and it documents the king's reconstruction, Nabopolassar, who is Nebuchadnezzar's father. It documents his reconstruction of the wall of the city of Babylon. So just showing you, these people existed. They were wrote about outside of scripture, and then you have them being talked about inside of scripture. All right, here's another one. We have Pharaoh Necho. Pharaoh Necho is important. You guys can see that? Thumbs up. All right, Pharaoh Necho. This is not written about in the Bible, right? So, but it is talked about. The people are talked about. So you'll get this. So the 17th year, 609, this is where we're getting ready to pick up in our history in our Jeremiah. 609 BC, in the month of Uzu, Ashurbanipal, who is the one we just looked at, king of Assyria, and a large army of Egypt, the forces of Necho II, crossed the river Euphrates and marched to conquer Haran. You guys don't remember where Haran is, go all the way back to Abraham. He had a brother who lived in a land. All these lands are still named up until this point the same. His army entered in, but the garrison which the king of Akkad, Nabopolassar, see, all these people are in conversation about each other on this stone, and the Bible, all these people are fighting each other at the same time, and Jeremiah is talking about it, had left there, killed, defeated them, and so he encamped against Haran. Till the month of Ulu, he made attacks against the town. Nothing, however, did he achieve, and they returned to Carchemish. All of this is in your Bible, by the way, but this is the Babylonian Chronicle of the years 616 to 609, famous for its description of the fall of Nineveh. And I've actually seen this in person. This is inside of the British Museum. Okay, so these people, these places, and these conquests actually happened. Not that I think anybody doubted it, but I don't know if any of you watch like the History Channel or you watch just television in general. And have you ever heard the conversations of, did the people even exist? Did David really exist? Did the Bible really exist? Did the Bible really da-da-da-da-da? And the more I travel and the more I study, I'm like, do people actually leave their houses? Do people smoke crack? Do people, like, how do you come up with this stuff when there's actual information that is in stone? The rocks are crying out and stating these things happen. But the issue is that if this is real, and if these things happen, and if they were prophesied ahead of time, then that God that they don't want to serve, that Yah guy, he's also real. And them people that he said he'd never take his eye off of, them also real. And they're also still here, just like these stones. And so that's very, 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 very important. All right, here's another thing. Now, this is just like one, and it's not, there's a bunch more pictures I'll share with you guys in a later time. But I need you to see where Megiddo sits, how somebody could see an army coming and what the valley looks like. So you guys know it as Armageddon, right? That's actually a mistranslation. It's a mistranslation. It was Har Megiddo, the mountain of Megiddo. And when it translated over into Greek, they called it Armageddon. And that's how it called Armageddon. So the battle at the end of the world, right? You guys have gone through Revelation. At the end of the world is supposed to happen here. The reason why that prophecy was put into place, and I learned this at this place, this is not just me coming up with something amazing because I'm so smart, is because Josiah, the righteous king, dies in this valley. He dies in this valley. And he dies at the hand of Pharaoh Necho. Oh, I didn't show you Pharaoh Necho. Hold on. Let me just pause for a second. Let me show you Pharaoh Necho. So I'm going to stop and then share again. All right. These are literal like head bronze statues of Pharaoh Necho II. They're housed in the Penn Museum, and it's there. There's a bunch of them. Actually, I feel like I went to the Jerusalem Museum and there were actually some statues and things that were found in the region. There might be some in there, so I'll share them with you. But I want you guys to know this. A bunch of different nations came through Israel. Bunch for long periods of time. So when they're discovering things in Israel, you think that they're only going to find, and sometimes it's disappointing. I think my first one was like, why is there so much stuff from Egypt here? Why is there so much? When you understand the conquest and you understand our disobedience and how many nations occupied that land after we got there because of our disobedience, you'll see why there was so much stuff. You'll see the blend of things, like when you see the scarab with the Paleo-Hebrew writing. Why? Because within the biblical context, like we read it, we're thinking of our relationship with Yah, our obedience to Yah. This is something that is not only a part of who we are, but it's also, it's sacred. It's religious. But remember, Israel was a real place. And so Yah's issue with Israel was two things, and you guys know this from previous chapters. He said, you guys are so worried about pleasing these other nations. He's like, you got your nose snuffed up, you're acting like a camel in heat, and that stuff doesn't make sense until it's put into the context of there were nations around who were fighting, and they were so busy not focusing on Yah being obedient that they were in the other nation's business. And so they were like, oh no, if Egypt hooks up with Assyria, then it's going to be a problem because Assyria is going to come back down here and get us. Instead of, we need to be obedient to Yah so Yah can fight our battles like he always has. They got hooked up on the political side. And so actually, they were not worried about Babylon because they were hoping Babylon won, because they were ticked off at how Assyria beat northern Israel. So they were literally like jocking Babylon for being like, yeah, whoop them, not knowing that Yah was sending Babylon to whoop them for their disobedience. So there was a political thing going on. Why does this matter in the context of anything as I'm moving toward Josiah? Because Josiah does something. Josiah does something very, very interesting. Josiah goes out and gets in Pharaoh Necho's face about going to meet Assyria. That's how Josiah ends up dying. Josiah hears that Pharaoh Necho is coming to help reinforce the Assyrian army. And because he's done this great thing of restoring Israel back to their proper place of worship and so forth and so on, he's like, Yah's with us. So he decides to take his happy self, and I'm going to read it to you. He decides to take himself out against Pharaoh Necho. It's interesting because Pharaoh Necho has some words for Josiah for even coming out there. And the exchange is actually written down in scripture. So now it's all going to come together, and then you'll have a better idea of what the political, spiritual, religious climate of Israel is during this time. Give me 1 second, because we're going to go 2 places. It's in both Kings and Chronicles. All right. And so we're going to, let's go to 2 Kings 23 and 29 first. All right. In his days, Pharaoh Necho, king of Egypt, went up against the king of Assyria to the river Euphrates, and King Josiah went against him, and he slew him at Megiddo. And when he had seen him, and his servants carried him in a chariot dead from Megiddo and brought him to Jerusalem and buried him in his own sepulchre. And the people of the land took Jehoaz, the son of Josiah, and anointed him and made him king in his father's stead. And Jehoaz was 23 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 3 months in Jerusalem. And his mother's name was Hamutal, the daughter of Jeremiah of Libnah. And he did that which was evil in the sight of Yah, according to all that his fathers had done. And Pharaoh Necho put his bands at Riblah, we're going to look at these places in just a second, in the land of Hamath, that he might not reign in Jerusalem, and put the land to a tribute, that meant that they had to give him so much money every so often, of 100 talents of silver and a talent of gold. And Pharaoh Necho made Eliakim, interesting, the son of Josiah, king in room of Josiah his father, and turned his name to Jehoiakim or Jehoiakim, and took Joaz away, and he came to Egypt and died there. All right, so this is like a political thing. Interesting enough, I'm going to read the next thing, but he changes his name from Eliakim, and Eliakim means El setteth up, like God has set up, to Jehoiakim, because Yahu or Yahweh was, or just Yah in general, was also in Pharaoh Necho's mind synonymous with the god Ah, who is the moon god of Egypt. So that he changed his name to literally mean Yah or Ah has set up. Because remember, pharaohs felt like they were God, and they had the ability to do something. Interestingly enough, as well, we're going to find out in the next reading, because the Chronicles go into a little more detail, that Pharaoh Necho was going to meet the Assyrian king in a place called Haran, and Haran is, keep this, the center of knowledge of the moon god. Very, very interesting. Very, very interesting. So the place, Haran, it means intersecting roads. It's in ancient Mesopotamia, and the temple for the moon god is actually there in that particular place. So when we get the dialogue, which we're going to get in just a second, the dialogue between Josiah and Pharaoh Necho, you're going to see a very interesting thing, but let's just read it. Let's just read it. So we're going to go to 2 Chronicles chapter 35, and we're going to go right around verse 20. All right. Okay. So where we end off, let's do the high point of Josiah before we go low. All right. And there was no Passover, verse 18, like to that kept in Israel from the days of Samuel the prophet. Neither did all the kings of Israel keep such a Passover as Josiah kept. And the priests and the Levites and all Judah and Israel were present, and the inhabitants of Jerusalem. In the 18th year, that's how we get these dates. In the 18th year of the reign of Josiah was the Passover kept. So some time went by, of course. After all this, when Josiah had prepared the temple, Necho, king of Egypt, came up to fight against Carchemish by Euphrates. Did he come to fight Josiah? No. He was coming up to fight against Carchemish by Euphrates. And Josiah went out against him. But he sent ambassadors to him, saying, this is Necho, what have I to do with you, thou king of Judah? I come not against thee this day, but against the house wherewith I have war. For God commanded me to make haste. Forbear thee from meddling with God, who is with me, that he destroy thee not. Tells him, I ain't got nothing to do with you. Based upon Jeremiah's prophecy, everything that's happening in this region is a direct reflection of the hearts of the people. And Yah is literally sending these nations, like he said, I put up nations, I bring them down. I put up kings, I bring them down. Pharaoh Necho said, Yah, Elohim, El has told me to go. Don't get in the middle of this. All right. So nevertheless, Josiah would not turn his face from him, but decides to disguise himself so that he can fight with him. So when he came out, guess what? Pharaoh Necho knew who Josiah was. He called him by who he was. He said, hey, king of Judah, I'll have nothing to do with you. So Yah had one or two ways. One, kings knew each other, but on the second part, he gave a favor. This man is literally on his way to war, and he's like, I ain't fighting you. You're the king of Judah. Yah has, you good. That's not my mission. So Josiah and his zeal to be in the politics of Yah, not toward the obedience of Yah. This is not the first time this happened. Check out John the Baptist and some others. Don't get in the politics of Yah. See how the grown folks business. Don't get in the politics of Yah, because we don't know how many things Yah has to move around and how many things Yah is orchestrating and how many things Yah is doing to keep us straight. Stay out of people's business. I almost said stay out of these westernized people's business. Stay out of these nations' business. Don't let that news get you caught up. Don't have that news make it picking your enemies for you. Don't have that news have you running out and talking about, oh, these people not this and this, not this, and we don't need to. Stay out of their business. I think this is very significant because as we move into the last days, there are battles and wars being fought by people who are from ancient to ancient. They call by different names, but there's business that has been prophesied and there's moves on the chessboard that have to happen. It's not checkers. There are strategic moves that Yah has been turning and moving since the beginning of time. Since we left the land, he's been rotating people and they've been changing gods and they've been changing kings, and he's been allowing it because the final battle, guess what, comes back to this place. And we are commanded to stay out of it. He said, you don't have to fight. He said, he's going to speak and it's going to happen. They're going to fight each other. And then it's going to clear out the land. This is before the end of the world. This is before and a new heaven and a new earth. They are going to fight in that land. And I can tell you it's true. And you can fact check me, double check me, go back. There's a place set up at Megiddo that I'm going to show you where this took place. And in 1964, the Pope went there. Every nation, there have been 30 different civilizations, 30 different nations that have torn down and rebuilt that place. It's a very, 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 very important military and strategic post for whatever reason. Stay out of people's business because this is what happened. Nevertheless, Josiah would not turn his face from him, but disguised himself. And put himself in a disguise that he might fight with him and hearken not to the words of Necho, from the mouth of Elohim, and came to fight in the valley of Megiddo. And the archers shot at King Josiah, and the king said to his servants, have me away, for I am sore wounded. And his servants took him out of the chariot and put him in the second chariot that he had and brought him to Jerusalem, and he died and was buried in one of the sepulchres of his father. This is important because when things are happening, especially as disenfranchised Israelites who have been scattered to the four corners of the world, we're always looking to see who we can have allyship with. We're always looking to see who, oh, they saying we the people, and these people doing da-da-da, and did you see da-da-da-da, and did you, da-da? And y'all's like, your only job is obedience. Your only job, the military stuff, I am the captain of this host. I am Yah-Zavaot. Do not get in front of me. Josiah was a good king. The text says that he went down as a good king. There was nobody who did better than what he did. And when he got outside of worship and obedience and tried to get political and tried to fight wars, he died. He died. He died, he died, he died. You have Israel so caught up with their beef, and if you can just translate this into what I'm saying, so caught up at their beef with Assyria because Assyria whooped them because they were disobedient. Assyria whooped them because they were disobedient. Assyria whooped them because they were disobedient. So caught up in their beef with Assyria that they were willing to make allegiances with nations that have been their enemies from old. Ready to jump in between a fight that Yah is orchestrating instead of getting out of the way, turning their heart and repenting. They were so political that they didn't think it was going to be bad. I'm going to jump forward just a little bit because honestly, it didn't jump bad right away. Pharaoh Necho killed Josiah. They couldn't stand Josiah anyway. Josiah come down, tearing down high places, right? They mourned, but then they were like, cool. What did they do? They went back to doing what they were doing. That's why Jeremiah's going off. They didn't, because Josiah died, go, oh, we really need to get our stuff together. No, this is not at all what they did. And when Jehoiakim gets in place, he starts giving tribute to Egypt. And what it seemed like was what Jeremiah said was going to happen didn't happen. Well, the other nations are in charge and all they want is some money. We just keep doing what we're doing. We just keep on doing what we're doing. And they thought that nothing was going to happen because they made their business political. So when you hear in the text where it says, you trusted in the horses and chariots of Egypt instead of fearing me, that's where that comes from. You thought you was good with the other nations not coming to get you because you was with the big dog. I'm the big dog. I'm him. I'm that guy. You're worrying about Pharaoh Necho and Assyria and Babylon and Nabopolassar. He's like, I'm the one moving them around to whoop you because you're disobeying me. So you want to take your lot with them? Okay. Our only business is covenant business. Everything that else happens ain't our business. It was never our business. It wasn't our business in the wilderness when he was like, y'all scared of them? He's like, you have your eyes on the wrong thing. Your eyes are on the wrong thing. If you're obedient to me, I fight your enemies. I'm the one who keeps a hedge around you. I'm the one that keeps the devourer away. I'm the one that'll make these nations fight each other in the valley and set you free. I do that. Stop watching the other nations. Stop watching what they do. Do not get caught up. Stop listening to people that keep you focusing on other nations. Our only business from the Garden of Eden, from the beginning, has been to keep our eyes on Yah, not to listen to what anybody else has to say. Who cares whether there was beasts of the field, whether there were other people outside the garden? That wasn't our business. When we got put in a protected place, our only business was to keep our eyes focused on Yah. That was it. In Goshen, it wasn't their business to walk over and see what happened in the other part of Egypt. When they were out in the wilderness, it wasn't their business to be worrying about what other people's plight was. This whole world could fall and burn today, and I walk like down the street like ain't nothing happened, because my eyes have to be on Yah. That is the mind of the Daniels. Like fire, lions, and even if he don't save me, it doesn't matter, because I know this body is not the final place for me. Guess what? He'll give me a new one, because he made this one out of some raggedy clay anyway. He made it from two corrupt people and put together in me, and he could do it again and 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 again. That's not our business. Josiah's business, based upon the prophecy, was the reformation of the hearts of the people of Israel. He would have been better alive than dead for Israel. He would have been better minding his own business in Israel than trying to go up against Pharaoh Necho, because that had to do with the hearts of the people who had not reformed in Israel. He caught the hands that was supposed to be for somebody else. That's not our business. It's not our business, specifically for disenfranchised Hebrews of the melanated hue. White people, not your business at all, at all, at all, at all, at all, at all. What they do, who they are, who they're not, that's not your research. That's not your business. It's not your business to figure out who this nation is and who that nation isn't and who they're fighting. That's not your business. Your business is obedience. Yah says, when you obey me, when you turn back to me, I will let everybody know you're who I loved. Pointing out who you don't think he likes doesn't make you more loved if you're disobedient. That makes you just look like a hater, honestly. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. Trying to prove through history, guess what? I'm going to blow your wig back. Everybody knows. Everybody knows. I went down an alley street randomly right outside Jerusalem in a Palestinian neighborhood, and two little boys walked out and said, Yehud, Yehud, random. Everybody knows. So you being mad at somebody who literally, Yah said, I sent the nation swift like an eagle with the language you don't know to come in and to get you because of this. And when you get into the land of your captivity, your business is obedience. Turn back to me, humble yourselves, and you will bethink yourself in the land of your captivity, and I will then hear you and I will turn your captivity. He didn't say, and when y'all figure out who the white man is, and when y'all figure out who Esau is, and when you figure out who the Nephilim is, and when you figure out who's going to be fighting here, that is a distraction, because it doesn't make you more obedient. It makes you more proud, and it makes you more angry. And then you cannot do what we're commanded to do by Hamashiach, which is to dwell peaceably amongst your enemies. That's a commandment. How can you dwell peaceably when you're trying to uncover the bones of your arch nemesis in your mind? It doesn't work. It doesn't work. You're going to WebMD and search and Google them to death and figure out everything that's wrong with you. You know what? America is narcissistic. That's what the problem is, right? You're going to do all that, and then guess what? Still be stuck, because you didn't do what you're supposed to do, which is mind your covenant business. That's the only business we have ever had, ever. Yeah, I was like, if you keep your eyes on me, that's it. I asked a person once, I said, why would a loving God, because we always ask these questions, why would a loving God create a devil? And you know what the response was? The devil wasn't none of your business. That was his business. You were supposed to have nothing to do with him. It doesn't matter. I had a friend come to me, and she said, I just can't believe in God because I know what crack did to my family. And why would God create crack? And I said, why would somebody turn from God and smoke crack then? Don't you got to be, that was never, the sin and the perversion of the world is not our business. And because Yah knows these things exist, he also gives the ability for us to be redeemed from them too, to get back to what? If we get back to the covenant business, we ain't gonna be worried about that. In covenant business, you're not worrying about your abusers. In covenant business, you're not worrying about what other people have going on. In covenant business, we're not hurt. We're not angry. Guess what? We move on because we know, you know what? Yah's in control. So guess what? Like in the, they can set up literally all and encamp around the camp of Israel and can't do nothing. But you know what they can do? They can get you out of your covenant business, have you scared, and then have you get in their face. But we've seen it happen. It was so crazy. During Gideon's time, they encamped and Yah was like, okay, now go over here and just break some clay pots and they'll fight each other. Yah was like, I got this. I will melt the heart of men for you if you just mind my covenant business. It's very, 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 very important. It's very important. So I had to say all that, because I'm gonna have to say something that people don't like to hear, which is a lot of people not minding their covenant business. And it's a lot of people teaching you all not to mind your covenant business. 99.999% of the stuff that's online talking to Hebrew Israelites is stuff outside of your covenant business. Keeping you up at night, got you worrying about what's this, and am I gonna have enough food to eat? And if Russia's fighting these, isn't that Gog? And isn't that, that's not your business. Yah is literally moving these people around for your sake if you're on the right side. Your only job is to know what side to be on. You don't have to take up armor. You don't have to fight. There's no more fighting to be done. First of all, we can't fight. America just sent something I ain't never heard of. It's a little missile thing. When you drop it, the other little bomb things come out all over the place. And they were like, oh, we got to wait till we get some more artillery, but this will do for now. I'm like, they got little things they can drop one and a bunch of other little things come out and they can lay dormant so that when you come across it, if it didn't go off and get you then, it'll get you later. We can't fight anyone. Ask some people in Philadelphia. This country will blow up blocks. These are people who will kill their own. It's called collateral damage. You have no fight in you. He says, I'm going to pursue you and I'm going to destroy you and I'm going to make you powerless at the hands of your enemies so that you know I'm it. I'm that guy. Well, guess what? That's today. Today, there's no one, there's no group. I don't care how many people dress up in purple and walk down the street. It's nothing. You know what that looks like to your adversary? It looks like open season. That's what that looks like. That's what that looks like. If they just felt like people wouldn't get pissed off, if they just was like, nobody will really care, they would plow them down in the streets and call it terrorism and call it a day. If they did it to the January 6 people and lock them up, what do you think they'll do to you for insurrection? Sit down and mind your covenant business. We're not flexing in front of our enemy. That's not our job, especially when a lot of us, I'm not gonna pay with, a lot of us, y'all probably not gonna pick up a rock and fight for still with fringes and head wraps on. Let's just keep it real. Because our heart is not toward him, it's still toward pride. We want the identity without the relationship. We want the recognition without the repentance. That's not how it works. It's not how this thing works. And if you think I'm lying, let's go to Jeremiah chapter 13.